Finally got rid of that old man, huh? The tasteless man burst out laughing, spitting as he spoke. That hateful person, who I couldn't stand to even look at, was my brother. He hadn't come to the wake or funeral, and now he returns home, not to pay respects to my father, but to spew such vile words. I couldn't tolerate it. "How can you say such a thing?" I yelled, appalled at his crassness. But my brother, unfazed, continued to sneer. "That stubborn old man never listened to me, good riddance. Now this house will finally be mine. Owning a house means you've made it, right?" Apparently, my brother had returned, not to greet our father, but to lay claim to the house. Throughout our father's illness, he never helped, only asking for money. Having a family to support, a rent-free house must seem very valuable to him. That's why I couldn't help but laugh to myself. "You think you'll get this house after all the trouble you've caused and not even attending the funeral?" Noticing my mocking smile, my brother frowned unhappily. "What? Of course, it's mine. Did he leave a will or something?" He glanced at the envelope in my hand. Assuming it contained the will. "Too bad for you. Even if he didn't leave me anything in the will, the law dictates how much a child can inherit from a parent. If I'm not satisfied with what's in there, I'll sue right away," he said, smirking again. Then he dismissively waved his hand at me. "Get out of here. This house is mine now." At that moment, I burst into laughter. Wiping tears from the corner of my eyes, I looked at my bewildered brother and said, "Oh, it really did turn out just like Dad said. I'm Victoria. 3 years ago, I married a slightly older man, and we've been both working since. It's been 10 years since my mother passed away, and my father, who now lives alone in our spacious family home, has recently become weaker in his legs. To support him, I convinced my husband to move in with him. I do have an older brother. But I never thought of asking him to take care of my father. My brother, 6 years my senior, seemed like a serious soccer player until elementary school, but his behavior worsened during his rebellious phase due to bad influences from friends. He would stay out late, ignoring not just our gentle mother but also our strict father, and often hung out with bad company. I was in early elementary school back then and didn't like my brother much because he rarely came home and was cold to me when he did. His bad associations didn't seem to end even years later. When my brother was a university student, he caused major trouble involving a woman. My father even had to apologize to the woman's family. Though I wasn't told the specifics, I had a pretty good idea, given my brother's rough manner towards me. As his sister, I could have retaliated, but romance complicates things. I worried about the woman and despised my brother for treating her so poorly. Unrepentant, my brother, upon father's return from apologizing, didn't apologize himself but yelled, "Why are you doing this without listening to me? You're a failure as a parent. If you treat me like this, it's no wonder I turned out bad." My mother tried to calm the situation, but my angry father retorted, "How can you say that after hurting a woman? You're no longer my son, and you're incapable of thinking of others. Don't show your face here again." My brother left, saying fine by me, but a month later, a voice message arrived. It seems my father stopped sending my brother money for tuition and living expenses right after he left. Worried, my mother wanted to call back, but my father angrily refused, and I agreed to ignore it. The calls stopped after a week, and we lost track of my brother. Later, my mother fell ill. She fought hard but passed away. She mentioned my brother until the end, so I tried to find him in secret, hiding it from my father. But with no common friends, I couldn't reach him in time for her last moments. However, my brother suddenly returned home soon after. I was surprised but told him about my mother. "Well." My brother responded briefly after hearing of my mother's passing, but the next moment, he said, "Hey, tell Dad to lend me some money. It's his fault I dropped out of college and couldn't get a decent job, so he should take responsibility." I was infuriated by his insensitivity, demanding money from my father who was already weakened by the loss of my mother, and I yelled at my brother, sending him away. My brother talked only of his hardships, seemingly oblivious to why my father had disowned him. I thought that someone like him, even if he was my brother, should not be allowed near our beloved father. However, my brother would show up at our family home every few months, attempting to see my father. It was okay when I was there, but I became anxious when I started working. My father's mobility worsened year by year, so he spent more time alone at home, only leaving when he felt well enough to go to work. I repeatedly told him to always keep the doors locked to avoid contact with my brother. "I can handle him with one hand," my father would say with a laugh. But I worried about the potential harm my brother could cause, given their age difference. Fortunately, my brother's visits became less frequent, and when I got married and began living at the family home with 3 of us, the worry decreased. Yet, considering the worst-case scenario, my husband and I had extensive discussions and decided to prioritize supporting my father's life. "If I become unable to move freely, I'll live in a facility," my father had said, considering our feelings, but I insisted on taking care of him at home. I tried to minimize the burden on my husband, using day services effectively while I was at work. But, after losing my mother, my father continued to weaken, seeming joyless and withdrawn. He gently refused my invitations to his hobbies like fishing or chess, spending all day indoors. His health deteriorated, and 3 years after we started living together, he passed away. Caught up in funeral arrangements and inheritance procedures, a week passed in a blink. Each time I disposed of one of my father's belongings, it felt like erasing evidence of his existence, so I hesitated many times, but I knew it wasn't good to keep them forever, so I sorted through my feelings. Having worked non-stop both day and night, I took a day off to rest at home. As I lay in bed, recovering from sleep deprivation, I heard the sound of a large truck stopping nearby. This area is full of narrow alleys, but is it okay? I wondered, but then I heard a click from the front door and jolted up, startled. Could someone have entered by mistake? Or a burglar? Even in broad daylight with people around? My husband always locks the door when he leaves for work, so it shouldn't be open. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might leap out of my mouth as I approached the entrance. Through the frosted glass of the door, I saw 3 silhouettes. Before I knew it, the sliding door was opened with a rattle, and I was faced with both familiar and unfamiliar people. Good, the lock isn't broken. What, you're still here? Well, that's fine, I guess. It would be troublesome to be accused of breaking and entering when no one's around. My brother muttered incomprehensibly. Standing beside him was a woman around his age and a small child. Though I had never met them, they were undoubtedly his wife and son. Despite being our first encounter, they looked at me suspiciously without a smile. "We have movers waiting outside, so I'll greet you later. Hey, help us move in. This is a chance for you to bond with my wife and son, and it'll make our move quicker. 2 birds with 1 stone." What? Moving in? I doubted my ears. The large truck I had heard earlier seemed to belong to movers carrying my brother's belongings. My brother smirked unpleasantly, starting to talk boastfully. "I saw Dad's name in the newspaper. Finally that old man kicked the bucket, we celebrated as a family. He was a lousy father, but as his son, I thought it's only right to inherit the house. I plan to live here from today. You shouldn't stay here any longer, so leave immediately." While I stood there in shock, my brother's wife quickly entered and began unloading their belongings. The child, perhaps excited by the large house, started running around. "Wait, I haven't heard anything about this, and I can't just hand over the house like that," I said, and my brother burst into laughter. "Hand over? Dad's dead, so it's my house now. Or did you think caring for him meant you'd inherit?" I saw through that. It's all in vain, the very definition of wasted effort. You might think I'm stealing from you, but traditionally, the son inherits. Understand? If you have time to argue, then leave immediately. He vented his frustration on me, apparently holding a grudge for not letting him near my father. At the continued insults even after my father's death, my patience snapped. And I was about to retort when I heard a cracking sound behind me, so I ran to the source. And came upon a scene where his son was standing and at his feet lay a picture frame containing my father's portrait, fallen face down. "What are you doing?" I shouted, and the startled son tried to flee. "Don't step on the glass, it's dangerous," I said firmly. It seemed that my brother's wife heard my shouting and came running, glaring at me fiercely. "What's wrong with you, yelling at someone else's child like that? Are you insane?" she accused me. Wanting to quickly restore my father's picture to its place, I regained some composure and began picking up the fragments of the frame. All the while, my brother's wife, holding the crying child, continued to hurl abuse at me. "Living in your parents' house even though you're married, you must have had a nice life. We never got any support from your father because you were in the way. Planning to inherit the house after just a few years of living together and taking care of things is utterly ridiculous. She spat at me like a machine gun. You probably didn't even take proper care of your father, did you? You just left him in a facility and relaxed with your husband. I heard your father had quite a bit of savings, and you made him pay most of the living expenses. The audacity of a younger sister like you. Normally, the son should be respected, right? I have a growing son, and have been married for over 3 years, so as the wife of his son, I have more right than you. Just leave quickly. I might forgive you for yelling at my son if you disappear now. Despite the fact that the child had broken an important portrait, there was no apology whatsoever, and I sighed at the sight of my brother's wife comforting the crying child, who was clueless about what had happened. For a moment, I paused, relieved that the child hadn't been injured, and pondered what to do next. If I didn't stop my brother and his family from continuing to bring their belongings into our family home, it would cause more trouble later. I need you to listen to me for a moment. What? After ignoring everything else, now you want me to listen to you? I didn't expect you to be this selfish. Dad and Mom must be crying in heaven. I won't be the chief mourner, but I'll attend the funeral and listen to you then. For now, I'm busy, so hurry up and pack your things. My brother said without even looking at me, scrutinizing the house as if appraising it for valuable items. But there was nothing of value left. As I pondered, a laugh escaped me involuntarily. My brother didn't miss my words. What's so funny? Are you mocking me? Yes, I am. Because it's just like Dad said it would be. I could feel the tense atmosphere. But I wasn't intimidated. I had intended to give you money the next time you came begging, but you never listened. Here, take this and read it carefully, I said, handing my brother a brown envelope. He snatched it, looking puzzled. Writing me out of the will won't work. The law dictates the share of inheritance. I'll sue you immediately. As he saw the words of the will in the envelope, my brother smiled triumphantly and unfolded the letter. It was indeed a copy of my father's will. About 2 months before he died, sensing his time was near, my father had prepared the will secretly. He was frugal and had left a substantial inheritance for both of us. The breakdown was almost equal between my brother and me, with slightly more for me due to the caregiving. However, it wasn't drastically less for my brother. The amount would allow for a comfortable living if one didn't indulge in luxuries. But seeing my sister-in-law today, dressed in brand-name skirt, boots, necklace, and bag, it was clear they led a far from frugal life. Her attire, too dressy for a moving day, hinted at her lack of common sense. What? What does this mean? My brother exclaimed, tearing the paper into pieces and throwing it on the floor. He had torn not just the copy of the will, but also copies of registry documents and a handwritten letter from my father. The house is already sold? That's impossible. Before he passed away, my father had informed me about his plans for the house. He would come to claim the house as soon as he heard of my death. So, I had already been making arrangements to transfer it to Simon. He just turned 20 this year and about to start a business. He is a promising young man. I had been very fond of him and wanted to help him out. I left something else for you since I couldn't leave you the house. I want your husband and you to live a happy life together. Simon was one of Dad's nephews. Dad got along well with all his siblings, and I often saw Simon around. A solid, kind-hearted young man, much like my uncle. I was fine with Simon inheriting the property and happily accepted Dad's decision. Simon was set to move in soon, and it was agreed that my husband and I could stay until then. I was already in the process of gradually packing. My brother, completely unaware of this, turned red with anger and shouted, "Who would be happy to buy such an old house? You're probably just giving it away to some relative. Who's getting this house? Tell me now so I can sort it out." The letter from Dad only mentioned selling the house. I had blacked out the personal information on the registry documents, which turned out to be a wise decision. Before I could respond, my brother's wife snapped at him, "What are you going to do now, after packing everything? Why didn't you confirm this earlier? You're really stupid." This seemed to hurt my brother's pride, and he grew even angrier. "You know who inherited this house, don't you? Contact them now, and either get this house back or give us your new house," he demanded illogically. "Why would that even happen?" "Yes, we're moving into a new place, but it only has space for us to live," I replied calmly, but my brother was too panicked to listen. "This kind of important matter is usually discussed with the whole family. Aren't you unsatisfied too? Inheriting the house to someone other than us. He rambled on, making no sense. I lost my patience. What? Don't compare me with you. I heard about this directly from Dad and agreed to it. You've been disowned for a long time and never even came to apologize, so you have no right to say anything now. My brother bit his lip in frustration, then continued. Then give me half of the money from selling the house. We are the only heirs. I have the right to inherit too. That amount is included in your inheritance share. The sale proceeds were partly used for Dad's treatment and the funeral. After settling all the expenses, what's left was divided in half. It can't just be this much. My brother fumed, his face red and sweaty. I sighed at his rage. It's an old house, as you yourself said. It didn't sell for a high price, and funerals aren't free, so this is what it amounts to. My brother fell silent at my words. However, his wife burst out again. This isn't what I heard. I decided to marry you because you said you were the wealthy eldest son of a rich family. You lied to me. Astonishingly, my brother had been boasting to his wife. It was one thing for his wife to decide to marry him thinking he was wealthy, but my brother's nature of exaggerating himself hadn't changed since childhood. Not wanting to escalate into a domestic argument, I tried to reason with my brother internally. But you haven't been left with nothing by Dad. Just save that inheritance, work steadily, and eventually, you can build your own home. My brother grimaced silently. And his wife kept frowning while playing with her smartphone. So, we can't go back home now? My brother's son muttered quietly. What do you mean we can't go back home? Suddenly, my brother lunged at his son, so I instinctively shielded the boy. Don't lay a hand on the child. What's this about having no home? I asked again. My brother's unexpected reply came. I got fired from my job. That's why we couldn't pay rent and came here. He embezzled company money. It's so embarrassing to get caught. But he said we'd have plenty of inheritance from his father, so I followed him. Now look at this mess. I'm the victim here. This is all because of your reckless spending. Don't you have any sense of remorse? Blaming me? It's you who can't earn enough to support your wife and child properly. It just shows you're incompetent. They both started arguing, completely forgetting about their child. I wondered if the child always lived in such an environment. It made sense why he wasn't properly disciplined. Realizing that my brother hadn't changed his opportunistic ways, I tried to get them out of the house. Then, his wife clung to me, begging. Look, we're really in a bad situation now. We don't even have a home. Don't you feel sorry for my son? We were completely deceived by your brother. I'm not asking to live in your new house, but can you share some of the inheritance with me? I want to buy clothes for my son's upcoming birthday. My brother's wife, seemingly producing tears on cue, began to cry. Indeed, the child's clothes were slightly too short. But this led me to a question. Is your son's birthday coming up soon? Yes, he's turning 4 next month. My brother and his wife got married a little over 3 years ago. This was something she had just mentioned, so there was no mistake. That meant if their son was turning 4 next month, he must have been conceived before they got married. Did you marry my brother right after you met him? What? Yeah, but what's that got to do with anything? I was almost certain now. If her story was true, she would have been pregnant before meeting my brother. As I was about to ask more, she turned pale, realizing her slip up. Why are you asking that all of a sudden? He's our child, so don't say weird things. My brother, noticing her agitation, reacted. Why are you looking like that? Got something to hide? From my perspective, it was unbelievable that my brother hadn't noticed her pregnant state at the time. He never showed interest in anything other than himself. Maybe it wasn't so strange that he hadn't noticed. However, as the silence from his wife grew more tense, my brother began to lash out at her. Then, she blurted out, "It's because you lied to me. My son is from someone I met at a nightclub I used to go to, but I chose you because I thought you had a better income." Taking her son, who was on the verge of tears, to another room. I called the police, requesting their intervention to apprehend my brother and his family and to ensure the temporary protection of her son. Within minutes, the police arrived and took my brother and his wife, who were causing a disturbance without any concern for the neighbors. A child welfare officer accompanied them to ensure appropriate care for her son. Some time later, I learned that my brother and his wife had divorced. My brother had filed for alimony against her, as she confessed to having deceived him about the child's paternity. However, she was nearly penniless. She sold all her branded items but still struggled to make ends meet, working tirelessly from dawn to dusk, leaving her son in the care of her parents. Despite his precarious situation, my brother shamelessly returned to our family home. "I don't have any money, so can you give me a little support? I can't work because of the severe mental stress from my ex-wife." Every time he came asking for help, my husband turned him away. Unlike my scrawny brother, my husband used to be the captain of the rugby team, so he has a rugged face and a muscular build. Faced with a man of such appearance, my brother seemed to have no choice but to leave sheepishly, and for a while, there was no contact with him. However, when the time came to transfer our family home to my cousin Simon, my brother appeared and confronted Simon, accusing him of stealing his home. My husband restrained him and handed him over to the police. Fortunately, Simon wasn't seriously hurt. My brother received a substantial prison sentence, freeing us from any fear of his return. Grateful for the new beginning, Simon thanked us as we prepared to move into our new life. My husband and I decided to save the entirety of my father's inheritance and continue living modestly. The new house we built isn't big enough to boast about to others, but it's a satisfying home filled with both of our personal touches, so it seems we'll have even more enjoyable days ahead.